It was supposed to be routine. Another polite handshake, another diplomatic photo op. But when Donald Trump leaned back in his chair, looked straight at Mark Carney, and said, "He's a nice man, but he can be nasty," the entire room froze. Cameras clicked, aides stiffened, and Carney's face told a story no microphone could capture. Behind that polite half-smile, you could almost see the calculation, the quiet dread of what was coming next. Because this wasn't just about handshakes and headlines. This was the Oval Office, and Trump had come armed with something far more powerful than charm. A plan to corner Canada's Prime Minister in front of the world. As the two men spoke, the tension built like a live wire. Compliments sounded like traps. Smiles hid silent duels. And when the moment came, the now infamous dairy bombshell, Carney's reaction said everything. This wasn't a meeting. It was a test of power. So, what really happened inside that room? Why did Trump choose this day, this topic, and this man to make his move? Let's break down the moment when body language spoke louder than politics, and Canada realized it was playing by Trump's rules. It was October 7th, not just any date, but the 2-year anniversary of one of the most volatile global flashpoints in recent memory. The Middle East was on edge again, and the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Trump knew exactly what he was doing. Mark Carney had recently recognized Palestine as a state, a decision that drew sharp criticism from Washington. The timing of this meeting was no coincidence. Trump's team scheduled it deliberately, aligning it with that charged anniversary. Every second was choreographed to put Carney on the defensive before he even walked in. As cameras rolled, Trump started soft, a compliment here, a nod there. He called Carney an extremely popular prime minister. He praised Canada's beautiful hosting of world summits. But beneath the charm, there was an unmistakable edge. When Trump mentioned Gaza, Carney's eyes dropped. His shoulders tightened. He shifted slightly in his seat, the kind of unconscious reaction analysts later replayed frame by frame. It wasn't just discomfort. It was recognition. Carney knew the conversation had been weaponized. This wasn't a friendly catch-up between allies. It was a setup. Trump had chosen the date, the topic, and the stage. Carney had simply walked into it. The charm offensive didn't last long. Within minutes, Trump turned the discussion to what he really cared about: trade. Steel, aluminum, cars, and tariffs. The invisible lines that had divided Canada and the U.S. for decades. Then came the joke that wasn't really a joke. Trump looked around the room, smiled, and quipped about Canada becoming the 51st state. Laughter echoed from his side of the table, but Carney's didn't. His lips curved, but his eyes stayed flat. It wasn't humor. It was dominance disguised as playfulness. A public reminder of who held the leverage. Trump's tone was casual, but his words cut sharp. "We have natural conflict," he said. "They want a car company, and I want a car company." Every sentence placed the U.S. above Canada. Larger market, stronger economy, more leverage. And every word put Carney in a corner he couldn't visibly react to. Carney tried to keep his composure, speaking about cooperation, shared goals, and mutual respect. But Trump wasn't interested in balance. He was framing the entire discussion as a competition that Canada couldn't win. It was psychological warfare, and Trump was winning it without raising his voice. You can script talking points, you can rehearse responses, but you can't fake body language. As Trump bragged about America's $17 trillion investment boom, Carney's posture betrayed him. His lips tightened. His hands clasped in a strange, tense grip, fingers bent, knuckles whitening. Viewers who slowed the footage could see the microtells, a shifting elbow, a brief shoulder tremor, a forced swallow. Trump spoke in absolutes. We're winning. We're stronger. We're back. Every boast was another blow. The unspoken message was brutal. America is thriving, and Canada isn't. Carney didn't interrupt. He didn't challenge. He just sat there, listening, trying to mask the unease that spread across his face. Trump wasn't negotiating. He was performing. For the cameras, for his base, and maybe for Carney himself. It was one of those rare political moments where silence said more than words. Then came the pivot, the question that turned a tense conversation into a diplomatic earthquake. A reporter's voice cut through the noise. Mr. President, will you sign a trade deal with Canada that doesn't include supply-managed goods like dairy? For a split second, the room went still. Then Trump dropped it. A deal would include dairy. It's going to include everything. Every Canadian watching knew what that meant. Dairy isn't just an industry. It's a cornerstone of Canada's economic sovereignty. Supply management protects local farmers and stabilizes prices. It's political dynamite. Carney's face changed instantly. His polite, diplomatic expression collapsed into disbelief. The corners of his mouth twitched, his eyes widened slightly, the look of someone blindsided on live television. This wasn't planned. It wasn't in the notes. Trump had just rewritten the negotiation. In public. In one sentence, he had shattered a long-standing Canadian red line. And Carney knew he couldn't push back, not in front of the cameras. It was more than a policy shift. It was a demonstration of power. And it left Canada and Carney utterly exposed. Moments later, just as tension peaked, Trump did something unexpected. He turned, smiled warmly, and called Mark Carney a world-class leader. He praised him for being a tough negotiator, a good man, and more popular than ever. The compliments poured out like honey, but they weren't sweet. They were strategic. Because in politics, praise can be the sharpest tool of control. By elevating Carney publicly, Trump cornered him again, forcing him to accept the compliment instead of responding to the insult. If Carney smiled, he looked complicit. If he didn't, he looked weak. Analysts later noted the contradiction. Trump had just humiliated him on dairy policy, then called him a great prime minister. It was psychological sleight of hand. Carney nodded politely, his lips forming that diplomatic half-smile again. But the eyes? Still frozen. He knew what Trump was doing, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. It was diplomacy as theater, and Trump had written every line. But here's where things get complicated, because Trump's praise might not have been random at all. Behind the scenes, these two men were more connected than most people realized. Investigations later revealed a web of financial links stretching from Washington to Toronto to the Persian Gulf. At the center of it all, Brookfield Asset Management, Jared Kushner, and a controversial Manhattan property, 666 Fifth Avenue. Here's what's been said. The Qatari Investment Authority injected billions into Brookfield. Brookfield then used $1.2 billion of that money to bail out Kushner's struggling building. Around the same time, Mark Carney, a former Goldman Sachs banker, held investments tied to Brookfield and its global ventures. Rumors suggest Trump's administration eased tensions with Qatar not long after. Coincidence? Maybe. But to many analysts, it looked like a quiet exchange of favors connecting the Carney network, Trump's family interests, and powerful financial backers. Reports claim U.S. investigators later scrutinized Carney's green finance alliances, massive climate investment groups accused of pressuring corporations under his leadership. To Trump's allies, that made Carney both powerful and vulnerable, a man worth flattering, but easy to corner. So when Trump called him a great man in the Oval Office, was it respect or repayment? After nearly an hour of tense back and forth, Trump finally leaned forward and said it plainly. "I think they'll walk away happy." That line was the biggest tell of the day, because it meant something had already been decided, just not announced. Sources close to both sides whispered that a steel and defense agreement was likely in the works. Canada would lift select restrictions. In return, Trump would roll back parts of the steel tariff. Hidden inside, analysts suspected, was a defense partnership involving Lockheed Martin, one that would conveniently benefit companies in which Carney had personal investments. To the cameras, it looked like diplomacy. Behind the scenes, it looked like damage control. Carney needed a win. His approval ratings were sliding, and his critics accused him of being too soft on Trump. A handshake deal, even one that cost Canada leverage, could buy him breathing room at home. And Trump? He got everything he wanted: a photo op, another trade victory, and a message to voters that America was back in charge. Then came the line that would echo across headlines. "He's nice, but he can be nasty." Trump said it with that familiar grin, part compliment, part warning. The room laughed. Carney didn't. His lips curled into a faint smile, but the rest of his face stayed still. That single phrase, "he can be nasty," captured everything about their dynamic. Trump admired him enough to use him. Carney respected him enough to fear him. It was diplomacy disguised as theater, and the audience, the world, had just witnessed a masterclass in controlled chaos. When the cameras finally shut off, Trump leaned back, satisfied. Carney stood, adjusted his tie, and left the room with the same quiet tension he'd entered with. Outside, reporters shouted questions. Inside, the air still buzzed with unspoken meaning. Two men, two countries, one invisible line between power and submission. And in that moment, it was clear who had crossed it first. Because in politics, smiles can lie, but body language never does. The Oval Office meeting wasn't just about tariffs or dairy. It was about dominance and the quiet cost of standing across from a man who understands power better than anyone else on earth. Trump played the showman, the negotiator, the alpha, all at once. Carney played the diplomat, holding his composure as his country's most sacred trade protections were quietly placed on the table. The handshake said partnership. The footage said pressure. And that single look, that flicker of shock when Trump dropped the dairy bombshell, told a deeper story. That even the calmest leader can crack when the stakes are national. In that room, diplomacy met theater. And theater won. Because sometimes the real story isn't in what's said. You're watching Cross-Border News, uncovering the truth behind the handshakes.